nation. I don't know if you've noticed, but usually when a people group gathers together, they start as a few, maybe a family, maybe a village, and then that village may grow into a larger group, could even become a city. And as they begin to spend time with each other, they want to identify themselves as opposed to other groups or cities, so maybe they'll get a flag. It says, this is who we are. And maybe we'll make some coinage or something like that. It says, this is the kind of thing we use for exchange. And maybe they'll have certain words they use or develop into a certain language and that kind of thing. And with Israel, it was totally the opposite. God said, this is where you're going to live. God said, this is what you're going to speak. God said, this is how you'll exchange things. This is how you'll get married. This is how you'll farm. This is how you'll do everything. He put it all in order before they did. And then he gave them certain promises. He said, if you do what I ask you to do, you're going to be fully supplied. You won't run out of food. You'll have peace and everything else. But most people, and I'll admit I'm one of those most people, I kind of want to do it my own way sometimes. I'm going to figure out how to do it. And besides, I've had come to this conclusion that God's big and God's busy. He's got all these people in the world to take care of, so I'm not even going to bother him with this one. I can handle it. And I've found out time and time again, I can't handle it. The interesting thing is, over time, people begin to lose the recognition as they move away from that people group or that nation or state underneath that banner of that flag, and they seem to disappear. Think about it. In the United States, people come to this country as immigrants, and usually the first generation will continue with the customs and the language and the foods that you had in the country you were in. But you have kids, and they're here in the United States, and they start losing some of that. They may not even speak their parents' mother tongue because they've been going to American schools and things like that. And they're starting to eat some of the American foods. We've traded sauerkraut for pizza, stuff like that. And then you get the next generation, it's like they don't speak their grandparents' original language at all. They've been assimilated. And they don't say, yes, I'm German, because my parents were German 2 generations ago. Or, yes, I'm Scandinavian, because my grandparents came from that place. You say, I'm an American. Or, I live in Colorado, so I'm a Coloradan. So 2.5 generations is usually what it takes to assimilate you. The interesting thing is after 40 generations, Israel has not been assimilated. The Jewish people have always maintained their culture, their language, although it went dead for a while and it got revived. That's never happened. People tried to revive Latin, and some of us are glad they didn't make it. But Israel is unique in that way. And God, one of the promises God gave the people was a chunk of land. If you've read Exodus 12, there's something that's known as the Abraham, what is it?
Abraham Accords?
No. I'm thinking of God gave Abraham an amount of land, and it's called I can't remember what it's called. I'm getting senile, so yeah. Well, he gave him a piece of land, and if you look up, it's Abraham's royal grant, okay? It's the land God said, this will be for you and your descendants. Abraham lived in a tent, didn't have a great piece of land, but God said, wherever you put your foot, I'm going to give this land to you. What's amazing today is it's about 300,000 square miles of land. In the zenith of the kingdom, under Solomon, they occupied about 30,000 square miles of land, so about 1/10 of what God had given them. And so I have this weird belief that every time somebody attacks Israel, if you go to war against them, they're going to take your land. I believe they can take your land clear out to the borders, which is the Nile River on one side, the Euphrates River over here, and clear up to Damascus. It all belongs to Israel. But today, everybody's going, it doesn't belong to you. It belongs to other people groups. And we've been here forever. We've been here longer than you have, and you have to get off our land. And that's my pet peeve. That's what irritates me. It's like, you don't even know. And I'll say upset or disturbed by the people who are going, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Do you know what you're saying? Do you really know what you're saying? Do you know what Palestine really is? Do you know who the Palestinians really are? And Do you know that you're actually calling for a genocide? We want to get rid of these people. And it's nothing new. We saw it with Haman, Book of Esther. We saw it with Hitler. We see it over and over again. It's kind of funny to me. Haman, Hitler, Hamas, they all start with H. I don't know what that means, but it's just interesting. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the history of the Palestinian people this morning, okay? And to start with, the history of the Palestinians goes back to, that's where everybody gets into an argument. Some of them will tell you they've been a glorious, proud people for 4,000 years. That's as old as anything in the Bible. Some of them will tell you they've been a glorious, proud people for 10,000 years. Some of them will say 30,000 years. And there are many who will say 200,000 years. So the Neanderthals were just babies when the Palestinians were already getting it together, right? So there's one small problem with this glorious history of the Palestinians. We can't find any history. We can't find any beginnings. We can't find any writings, any recordings of them being a people. In 721, Assyria conquered the kingdom of Israel. And the Assyrians kept records. You know, they made clay tablets and all these different monument-type things. We call them stelas or something like that. And if you go through all the Assyrian history and all the Assyrian writings, you're going to find there's nothing that mentions any glorious Palestinian people, or even Palestine for that matter, because it wasn't there yet, okay? And so the Assyrian chronicles are full of reports about battles with Israel, and maybe the Palestinians fought alongside the Israelis, but there's no record of that. We can't find any record of that whatsoever. So the Assyrians didn't notice the Palestinian people. If you ask a Palestinian that's semi-educated on this, why not? They'll say, well, Sargon was a Zionist, so he chose not to include the Palestinian people. Well, we can't find any record of him being a Zionist, of all things. So, but maybe, you know, who came next is the Persians. Maybe the Persians found some record of this wonderful people and recorded what they did, their language, their culture, their achievements, their art, anything you'd find with a normal people group, right? But the Persians didn't say anything about them. They talked about Jews. They talked about how Cyrus granted them privilege to go back to Jerusalem after they'd been taken by Babylon, but nothing about any Palestinians. So Alexander the Great comes through. And Alexander the Great conquered a lot of people, and he recorded, made a list of the people that he conquered, the nations he conquered, the people groups and all that. And he did come through Israel. He did come through the land that's called Palestine today. But you know what? He had no record of any Palestinian people. He did record that there were Arabs and there were Jews there, and there were some other people groups there, but no particular people group called Palestinians. So he didn't know anything about it. After Alexander the Great, we've got the Romans, right? And the Romans were meticulous with their records of what they did and where they went and who they conquered and all that kind of thing. And they went into great detail about besieging Jerusalem and attacking Jerusalem. And they informed everyone how the Jews were desperately defending the city of Jerusalem. And you keep going through the Roman annals and the things about that. Talks about fighting at Masada, talks about how they renamed Jerusalem, Alea Capitolina. This was Caesar 135, Hadrian, okay? Caesar Hadrian hated the Jews because they continued to rebel and rise against them. You know, the temple was destroyed in 70 AD. That was during the first Jewish revolt. This second revolt in 135 is the Bar Kokhba revolt. And he hated them so much that he decided to rename the land. Who was Israel's most hated enemy? Philistines. So you take the name Philistine and you corrupt it a little bit. Philistine, Palestine, Philistine, Palestine. That was the name of the land. He named it Palestine, after the Jews' most hated enemy. I asked someone last night, I said, what's your most hated enemy? They said, Satan. I said, okay, I'm going to call you Satan from now on. That's what's going on there. That's what happened there, okay? So there weren't a specific people group called Palestinians. There was a land area named Palestine by Emperor Hadrian, okay? The Romans passed on. They went away from that. And it's kind of hard to figure out where were the Palestinians when the Arabs showed up. If they're not, who are they? Where are they? Where's the information? Where do you find them? So modern Arabs say they're Palestinians. And what did the Arabs of the 7th century say? They said, we're Arabs. They didn't say they were Palestinians. And there's no written document, and if you can find one, I'd sure love to see it because I've been looking for a long time. But there's no written document in the period of Arab rule in Palestine that would say that some Palestinians organized themselves or lived there among the Arab peoples or something like that. It's just not there. And it becomes, to me, kind of amusing that they're foaming about their forefathers lived in Palestine from time immemorial. Prove it. You can't. There's no way to do that. That document doesn't exist. So, well, Arab rule in Palestine didn't last that long. It was about 300 years. After the Arab conquest, then the Turks, then the Mamelukes, then the Ottomans threw everybody out. It was the Turkish people. An Ottoman Empire lasted some 600 years, mainly in that area over 400 years. And enough time to find this numerous, populous, proud, cultural group of Palestinians. There was a land called Palestine, but the Turks didn't call it that. They called it the Turkish Ottoman Empire. And it remained under that name for 400 years. So they accurately put together census, number of Jews, number of Arabs, number of Caesarians, number of Bosnians who lived in Palestine. They even detailed information about the number of Muslims that lived in Palestine and Christians that lived in Palestine and Jews that lived in Palestine, but there was no mention of any Palestinian people in their records. So Assyrians, Babylonians, Greeks, Romans, Persians, and Arabs did not notice any Palestinian people. Okay? Turks didn't notice any of them. And people are wondering, where are these guys hiding? And then it was 1917. You remember World War I had ended. The Turkish Ottoman Empire was aligned with Germany. And when Germany lost, so did the Turkish Ottoman Empire. The British came in and they formed a mandate. It was called the British Mandate in Palestine. They revived the name. So it's the land of Palestine. And who lived in Palestine according to British records? Arabs and Jews live in Palestine. We don't have a record of any Palestinian people. I often kind of joke about it. It's like you live in Colorado, right? So you're Coloradans because that's where you live, on that piece of land that has that name. Who's the father of Colorado? Who's the patriarch of the Coloradan people? Where is their long and glorious history? There isn't any, because it's the name of a piece of land, that's all. And if you live there, you'll be called by that name, you know. So the politicians of the Arab countries, of course, they would tell you who the Palestinians are, right? They don't, and they won't. And they will actually, I'm going to read you some quotes where they will tell you there isn't any Palestinian people, they're Arabs. They're Syrian Arabs, they're Jordanian Arabs. First Congress of Muslim Christian Associations, February 1919. We consider Palestine as a part of Arab Syria as it has never been separated at any time, and we connect it with national, religious, linguistic, natural, economic, and geographic bounds. That's it. It's part of Syria. Then we go to the United Nations, the Arab Higher Commission, General Assembly, 1947. Palestine was part of the province of Syria, and that politically the Arabs of Palestine were not independent in the sense of forming a separate political entity. That's from Arabs in Syria. 1937, local Arab leader Ani Bey Abdul Hadi told the Peel Commission, which ultimately suggested the partition of Palestine, there is no such country as Palestine. Palestine is a term the Zionists invented. There is no Palestine in the Bible. Our country was here for centuries as a part of Syria. Palestine, Transjordan are one. King Abdullah, Arab League meeting in Cairo, April 12, 1948. So the Arabs in the 40s didn't notice any Palestinians or any Palestine for that matter, okay? Then in the 1940s, actually, let's go a little further. Syrian President Hafez Assad addressing the Palestinian leaders and chairman of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, president of the Palestinian National Authority, PNA, father of the Palestinian people, Yasser Arafat, and explained to him, you do not represent Palestinians as much as we do. Never forget this one point. There is no such thing as a Palestinian people. There is no Palestinian entity. There is only Syria. You are an integral part of the Syrian people. Palestine is an integral part of Syria. Therefore, we, the Syrian authorities, who are the true representatives of the Palestinian people. And so, of course, Yasser Arafat would refute this, right? No, I am. I'm the founder. I'm the president. He didn't. He said, the question of borders doesn't interest us. From the Arab standpoint, we mustn't talk about borders. Palestine is nothing but a drop in an enormous ocean. Our nation is the Arabic nation that stretches from the Atlantic Ocean to the Red Sea and beyond. The PLO is fighting Israel in the name of Pan-Arabism. What you call Jordan is nothing more than Palestine. So then, Azmi Bashira, he was a Knesset member. Some people find that strange. Arabs were members of the Knesset in Israel. You're a citizen of Israel. You can represent your people in the Knesset, like our Congress. But Bashir got kicked out of there because he was passing sensitive military information to Hezbollah during the Second Lebanon War. So he's not Israel's best friend, okay? And he says, there is no Palestinian people. Truth is, Jordan is Palestine, Palestine is Jordan. That's King Hussein of Jordan, 1981. National Assembly, Prince Hassan of Jordan says Palestine is Jordan, Jordan is Palestine. There's only one land with one history and one and the same fate. It's not Palestine, it's Jordan. Do you remember that Jordan was part of the land that was given by the British before World War II? They haven't even been there that long. Most of them were in the 20s and the 30s. Egypt was an old name when they reestablished that place, but places like Iraq and Iran, those kind of things, they haven't been there that long. They are newer countries in the scheme of things. Abdul Hamid Sharif, Prime Minister of Jordan, 1980. The Palestinians and Jordanians do not belong to different nationalities. They hold the same Jordanian passports and as Arabs and have the same Jordanian culture. But the Arabs who lived in Palestine since assure us that time immemorial, of course, did not let Syrian dictators deprive them of their national unity and culture. No, they never did. They never did. Here's what I find interesting. Did you know that until 1950, the newspaper in Israel was called, it's called Jerusalem Post now. Until 1950, it was called Palestine Post. Who owned and operated the Palestine Post? Jews, completely. The Journal of the Zionist Organization of America was called New Palestine. The Leumi Bank, can't say that right, Leumi Bank, it's the biggest bank in Israel, was originally known as the Anglo-Palestine Bank. All operated by Jews, not any Arabs. The electric company, Israel's first electric company, original name was Palestine Electric Company. Again, owned and operated by Jews. There was a Palestine Foundation Fund, the Palestine Philharmonic, There's not any Arabs ever listed in the Palestine Philharmonic. It happened to all be Jews. There were Jewish organizations that were run by Jews. In America, the anthem of the Zionist youngsters was Palestine, my Palestine. And the Palestine Scout song was Palestine Spring Song. So until the late 60s, to call an Arab a Palestinian would mean that you would insult him. And you would say, are you a Palestinian? I'm not a Jew. Don't call me that. And it was commonly associated in all the world with Jews, and the entire world knew Palestine is just another name for Israel and Judah. For example, anybody heard of the name Kismet? It's an ancient name for Egypt. What do we call it today? It's Egypt. Did Kismet change anything? No, just another name. So there's a country in the Far East. It's called the land of the rising sun. That's what the people of that land call it. But we don't call it, maybe because we weren't as poetic when we got there. Maybe because we got there at sunset instead of sunrise. So we call it Japan. They still call it land of the rising sun. Many call the land in the Middle East Palestine. The Jews still call it Eretz Israel, the land of Israel. The West calls it Palestine. Golda Meir, there's an interesting clip of her on YouTube, and she says, I'm a Palestinian. I held a Palestinian passport from 1921 to 1948. There was no such thing as no such thing as a Palestinian. There were Jews and Arabs. That's all. I don't care. I didn't say there were no Palestinians, but I'd say there was no such thing as a distinct Palestinian people. And why have the Palestinians in the West Bank become more Palestinian since the 5th of June 1967 than they were before? So why didn't they set up a two-state solution back then when they had the opportunity? Do you know they've turned down the two-state solution 5 times? Because the two-state solution they want is only a one-state solution. From the river to the sea, kill all the Jews. That's the solution. So the other thing that fascinates me is thousands are interested in Gaza. What about Yemen? Anybody seen that in the news lately? We've kind of even lost the news about Russia invading, right? What about the Kurds? What about Syria? Do you know over the past few years, 800,000 people have died in Yemen and Syria? But we don't even get the news. In the last few weeks, 20,000 people died in Gaza. Half of them were terrorists, but nobody mentions the Kurds. Nobody mentions the bigger picture. Why? One journalist said, ain't no Jews, ain't no news. That's the situation. So when people come and say, the Palestinians versus the Jews, it's like, come on, Jews are Palestinians. That's my pet peeve. I want you to recognize that the Palestinians are not a people group. It's the name of a piece of land. It's the name of a country. And God has made certain promises to the people of that country, even Arab people. He's given a promise to, if they will recognize him as Lord and Savior. So, as Dave mentioned, I just got back from Israel. I love going to Israel. I would encourage everybody to go to Israel. It changes your Bible reading and understanding. But I do have to warn you, it's addictive. I've gone 61 times. Next month I'll go 62 times. And here's the cool thing. People say, is it dangerous? Yes, it's dangerous. And I tell them once we get out of LA, told you all that last night, you're safe, it's good. People say, isn't it really expensive? Yeah, I'd say so. But you have to look at the perspective of it, okay? Have you looked at what it costs to go to seminary these days? A decent seminary costs about $40,000 a year. So for 1/10 of that, 2 weeks in Israel will give you the same education as a year in seminary. So you can save yourself, $36,000 by going to Israel instead of seminary, and learn in a lot of ways a lot more because it's firsthand experience. It's not just book learning. It's not just in your head. It's something you've seen and and you've experienced. So, well, what if I can't afford it? Sometimes the scripture says you have not because you ask not. So if you'd like to go to Israel, have you asked? And that's the first thing I'd say to do, is get on your knees and say, Lord, I'd like to go home and visit my spiritual home and see what he does. We have miraculous testimonies. I like to ask people after we come back, how did you get here? Oh, my aunt died and left me an inheritance, and I was able to go to Israel. Or here's a crazy one. My house burned down, but I had enough insurance to go to Israel and still get another home when I got back. God does miraculous things to accomplish his purposes. So let's go ahead, and I've expressed my pet peeve. Do you have any questions about Israel or about what's going on or that kind of thing? And if I don't know the answer, I'll just make one up. But not really, kidding. Questions, comments?
This is probably a dumb question.
I don't think there's any dumb question.
But why doesn't, if Syria or Jordan lays claim to this area, why wouldn't they, make some kind of overture right now?
Well, they're going to use Hamas and those guys as a proxy army, okay? They don't want to take on Israel themselves. They have before in 1948, through the 50s a couple of times, 1967, 1973, and they got beaten badly every single time. And when they do that, what happens? Israel steps in and takes more land, And then they go, hey, that's our land. Well, I'm sorry, you guys lost. It's not usual that when you defeat a country, you give them everything back and say, okay, we're sorry. We didn't mean to blow you up. Take it back. Somebody equated it to Mexico. California, Oregon, parts of Nevada, Utah, Arizona, all that belonged to Mexico. Then we had the Spanish-American War, and we took all that. And the Mexicans should have said, from the Rio Grande to Portland, get rid of it all. This is ours, Mexico will be free. Well, they decided instead to just become their own country, to actually put their time and efforts into building their country. They're the 12th largest economy in the world now. And honestly, the Arabs I've met in Israel, most of them really like Israel. The reason is their GNP is twice of any other Arab nation, and they make a better living there. But at the same time, I've got to keep up a facade that says, I don't like the Jews because my family and friends are all saying that, and I still want to, go to my dad's birthday party kind of thing and not upset the whole family. So I will quietly work hard in Israel, make more money than the rest of you, but tell you that, yeah, it's horrible. So they don't want to. They're going to let somebody else do the fighting for them.
What do you think is going to happen when Netanyahu goes into take the, when he goes and does something on this?
He's going to.
I know he is.
He is. And I believe what's going to happen is like always, Israel steps in, everybody gets mad, but eventually they leave it alone. And he has to go into Gaza because this particular mindset is, if you leave us alone, if we don't go into Riyadh, if we don't touch that, what's going to happen? Will they become docile and not attack us anymore? No. When they gave Gaza to Arab peoples to establish their own country, to try and govern themselves, it was a horrible mess. They can't govern themselves in Gaza. They can't govern themselves in the West Bank. They can't govern themselves in Lebanon. Gaza was a wonderful place. It was on line to become the next Singapore. The beaches are beautiful. They built farms. They put in infrastructure. They built roads. They put in sewer. They put in water systems. The Gazans get in within the next year. Hamas becomes the government. Hamas doesn't care about the people. They dug up the water system and the sewer systems and everything they could because these pipes make nice rockets. So thanks, Israel, for the equipment to build rockets that we can shoot at you. Forget that the people don't have any water or sewer or anything else. And the part of this mindset, again, that blows my mind is it's like, okay, Israel moved out. Some of the Jews were taken out kicking and screaming. But to the Arab, here's a nice new home. Hey, Jews lived there, didn't they? Yeah, but it's yours now. It's your home. No, we got to burn it to the ground because they lived there. The farms were plowed up, the animals were killed, the homes were destroyed. They had industries, they had dairy farms, they had chicken ranches and everything. It's all gone. Why can't they feed themselves today? Because they destroyed and threw away everything that was left for them. So, sad story, but it happened again. When Israel gave the Sinai back to Egypt, there was a tomato factory down there, a place called Yamit. And they perfected growing tomatoes. They did a hydroponic kind of thing. Instead of using acres of land to plant tomatoes, they had poles. They were 8 to 10 feet high, and you drill holes. You ever seen a Mexican flower pot? They'd plant these tomatoes in these little holes, grew huge amounts of tomatoes, and Israel said, you're going to leave. We're giving it back to Egypt. Those people didn't want to either. And Israel had to finally destroy the tomato plant in Yamit to get Jews to leave the Sinai and come back to Israel. Another point, when these wars start, things like 1973, in 1967, the Arab people, the Arab nations, okay, Syria, Jordan, Egypt, and others, would say, listen, move out of Israel, give us 2 weeks, we'll wipe out those Jews, and then you can come back and have your land and theirs too. Well, it didn't work out that way. They all moved out. Israel won, and all the Arab nations kicked out the Jews, and Israel had to assimilate them, incorporate them. In the meantime, how many of the Arab nations assimilated the Arabs that left Jerusalem? They didn't. They'll tell you there were no concentration camps, but that's what they did to their people. On one of my early trips, about 1975, 76, I took pictures of, there were mud villages with no sewer, with no water, and this is where Arafat was able to go in with young people and educate them in the ways of, do you see what Israel's done to you? This is horrible. We need to go back and take our land from those people. Israel didn't do it at all. Their own people did it to them. But if you don't read history, you know the story, you're doomed to repeat it. So if Netanyahu does it and the whole world gets mad, Scripture tells us, in the end, Israel will stand alone. So we're still hanging in there, but
Would you have a book or books to recommend in terms of maybe the last 100 years of history for that area? I mean, is there?
yeah,
Get educated on?
there's hundreds of books, though, is my only problem. There's one called From Beirut to Jerusalem. There'd be a really good book for that. I can't think of any others, but I have a library list. Matter of fact, if you'd like, I can give you a list. Before we take people to Israel, I give them a list of books and a list of movies to watch to help you to understand the history of Israel. A lot of us are familiar with what happened up to the crucifixion and resurrection and up to 1948 and what happened in the middle of all that. A whole bunch of stuff, but it's not a part of our history, so we don't study it in school or any place else like that. So I'll give you the list. Okay? All right. Yes, sir.
So, since you've been to Israel, going on 62 times, what's the most spiritual impacting area or location that you've been to? Just
Well,
Or can you narrow
again,
it to
it
one?
depends upon the person, but I actually have 4 of my most favorite spots, okay? Number 4, there's a gate in a place called Tel Dan. Tel Dan's one of the tributaries of the Jordan River, comes from Mount Hermon, and the tribe of Dan, didn't belong there. They didn't like the land that was given by the Lord through Joshua because there was Philistines there, and they didn't want to fight the Philistines, so they found some people who were weaker up in the north, and that place is like a resort. It's beautiful, it's tropical, and they moved in there. But you remember that it was called Laish, the ancient name, And when the enemies came and took Lot, Abraham went there and further to get his nephew back and his families and all their goods. And they came through. There's a gate there that's 4,000 years old, and with a high probability that Abraham walked through that gate. And to me, it's just like, whoa, Abraham stood here, and I'm standing where Abraham stood. That's amazing. And it's an arch. The Romans said they invented the arch. This is 2,000 years before the Romans invented an arch. There was already an arch there. It was made out of mud brick, and it was buried in the earth for years. When they finally found it, they actually had to cover it with a canopy to keep the rain from washing it away. 4,000-year-old treasury. My third favorite spot is Mount Carmel, where Elijah met the prophets of Baal. And from Mount Carmel, you can see the Kishon River, where he took the prophets of Baal and the prophets that Jezebel was feeding. But you go on the roof of this little monastery, and there's arrows pointing to places all around. You can see Mount Hermon. You can see Mount Tabor. You can see Nazareth. You can see Nain. You can see Mount Gilboa. You can see the valley where Gideon fought the Midianites, right? You can then go over and you can see other areas of the Galilee, and clear on around the roof, Megiddo, until you get to the Mediterranean Sea. You can see all of that from up there, and you could just stand up there. I could stand up there for 2 weeks straight, and we'll just have Bible studies all day, every day, on what you can see from that location. So I love that location. Then my second favorite spot is in Jerusalem. At the Museum of Natural History, they built a model city, 1/50th scale of Jerusalem in the time of Christ. And you kind of go up these steps, and then suddenly this whole city is in front of you. It's like a little model city. And it's like, and there's the Praetorium, and there's Antonia Fortress, and there's the East Gate, and there's Jaffa Gate, and there's Damascus Gate, and here's the Dung Gate, and here's the Valley of Kidron, and here's the Valley of Hinnom, you know. And it's like it's all laying out in front of you. It really puts together some of the geography of the city. What I like to do is I will run up the steps ahead of everybody else, so that when they get to the top step and they see the whole city, I'll take their picture, because they're all like, whoa, that's fun. And then my first favorite spot is Garden Tomb. There's debate over, where the exact location was. The important thing is, and what they express at the Garden Tomb, the important thing is, he's not here. He's risen. So this place commemorates that. It very well could be the place. It fits the description in the Gospels. Golgotha nearby. A garden. There's a cistern there. There's a wine press there. And there's a family tomb there. And you can actually look in the door to see where the families would be laid. In most tombs in Israel, there's shelves. When you bury somebody in the Middle East, you don't leave them in the tomb. It takes a few months for the flesh to be eaten, and you take the bones and you put them in an ossuary. Several times you'll read in Scripture, and his bones were gathered to his fathers. It's because your dad's bones are in the same box, right? Literally, they gather your bones to your father's bones, put it all together. So I love that place. It's a very emotional place, just to remember what the Lord did for us. And we usually have communion there. Some other favorite spots of other people, though, I find that the Sea of Galilee, we go out on the Sea of Galilee, and you talk about Jesus walking on the water, Jesus calming the storm. You can do 10 Bible studies out there on the Sea of Galilee, too, and people come back just totally like, wow. And what I like about the Sea of Galilee, sometimes we'll rate locations as an A, B, or C. A is, this is the place. B is, might be the place. C is, this commemorates what happened, okay? Galilee is an A, and nobody's been able to build a church over it. There's no incense, there's no rocks to kiss, there's nothing else. It's the Sea of Galilee. They haven't been able to move it. And it's really neat. Another wonderful place that we have a good time with is southern steps to the temple. These were built by Herod. And so these are steps that Jesus would have taught on. to the multitudes. These are steps where the disciples would have gone. These are steps where Mary and Joseph would have taken Jesus to the temple to dedicate him. And so it's like, wow. And there's a neat story. It's in the book that I mentioned to you. Neil Armstrong, first man on the moon, right? He's being given a personal tour by an archaeologist named Ben Dove. And so he told Ben Dove, he'd been asked, where do you want to go? He goes, I want to go somewhere where Jesus walked. So Ben Dove took him to the southern steps, and he goes, is this where Jesus was? He goes, yeah. Not just Jesus, his mom, his dad, all of his friends, they were all here. And he goes, the actual spot, I'm standing where Jesus stood and walked. He goes, yeah. And he goes, you know what? This is greater than walking on the moon. So kind of a fun place to be. We always get our picture taken walking where Jesus walked. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. I told you last night if you'd like to go, Dave, you'll put together a tour group, right?
Save your pennies and
The what?
save your pennies.
And pray and say, Lord, provide my needs. Ask the Lord. See if he doesn't provide for you. Anyone else? Anything else? Yes, ma'am.
Political side,
Yeah.
we know that Hamas is like small potatoes and Hezbollah is the big potatoes.
Yeah.
So short of nuking Lebanon, how are they going to get rid of Hezbollah?
I feel bad for Lebanon because Hamas is coming in there. To me, they're like a bully gang. And the government of Lebanon doesn't want to mess with them because they'll turn on them. And it's their own people sometimes doing that, much of the time doing that. So Hezbollah and Hamas are, again, proxy armies being funded by Iraq to mess with Israel. Iran, yeah, sorry. I get those two confused. But,
They're much more sophisticated.
oh, yeah. Lebanon at one point was considered the Paris of the Middle East. It was the financial center of the Middle East, and it's been blown apart. A beautiful city's been destroyed, and it's horrible, but it's because of the gangs.
So how does Israel will do that? Because Hezbollah is not in one place, they're in multiple places.
Right.
So
And so Israel basically waits till somebody shoots at them, then we'll shoot back because we can pinpoint where it came from. And now we'll go in because we really are. The interesting thing about Jews in Israel, Jews and Americans, Jews and Christians, is we believe in life, in the sanctity of life. Muslims don't. They believe in the sanctity of death. It's good for me to die because then I can go to where I get my 72 virgins and all that kind of thing. And if you watch Muslim TV, Arab TV, not CNN or anything or BBC, if you watch their TV, it's scary because I watch them interview children. What do you want to be when you grow up? You want to be a doctor? You want to be a pilot? No, I want to be a terrorist. I want to carry a dynamite vest like my dad did, you know. What do you want to be when you grow up? Somebody who knows how to kill Jews, you know. They have sitcoms like we do. They've been modeled after our sitcoms. You get the family, and it's like the kid comes home and goes, Dad, some Jews on the way home were mean to me. And Dad goes, it's okay. We're going to blow them all away. We'll get our revenge. That's a sitcom. That's interesting there. Popular songs. They have a channel like MTV. And this young 20-something good-looking guy is singing, and they're putting the lyrics on the bottom of the screen so I can understand them. And he's singing, don't cry for me, Mom. You gave me birth so that I could serve Allah. Don't cry for me, Dad. My blood will be spilled for the glory of Allah and his kingdom and that kind of thing. And it's like, this is the popular song among the
ideology.
yeah. And they're being brainwashed this from little. That's what's so scary to me. I have a friend, and I call her Brenda the baby smuggler. She's really a child advocate, and I call her that because she will go to Syria, she will go to Lebanon, she will find children who have been wounded through war or mistreatment or whatever, and she will take those children into Jordan where they do a pre-op kind of a triage thing. If the child needs surgery or can be helped, she has agreements with doctors in Israel and even Jewish doctors in what is it in the East Coast? I don't know. Big hospital, big names. St. Jude's, places like that, she gets the kids surgery and medicines and things like that. And then she takes them back to Jordan where they can recuperate and recover. And then the mom will take the child back to Syria or Lebanon. If a Muslim entity, especially in Syria, finds out that this child has been touched by Jewish doctors, then we kill the child and the mom. So she's a child advocate. She's a transporter. I got calls from her yesterday. Can you please take 10 pairs of goggles over for Israeli soldiers? We order them through Amazon, but it's too expensive to ship. Last month she was asking for thermal underwear. I've got, when I get home, I've got 12 pairs of thermal underwear for people in the group to take over this next trip. She wanted gloves. And my question was, doesn't the Israeli army issue you gloves? Yeah, but sometimes when you're out there fighting, you take your gloves off to pull the trigger, and then in the midst of the melee, you can't find them again. Or they get torn, they get ripped, they get destroyed. So there's a big need for a lot of things, and so she's the transporter, she's the baby smuggler. So it's kind of fantastic. She's an American woman, and she took a trip to Israel to visit, and God touched her heart, and she moved over. She now speaks Arabic, and she now speaks Hebrew, and she's the grandmother type, the silver hair and all this. So she actually gets respect from Arab and Jewish younger people because she's a grandma. And that's part of the culture too, on both sides. Respecting your elders. Anything else? Dave?
All right, thank you, Bob. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Let's all take about 10 minutes, fellowship a little.